Hi everybody, this is Andy Blancero, a home fermenter participating in Staten Island Museum's Earth Day How To Festival. And what I'd like to show you today is how to make sauerkraut. That is, bringing yourself from raw materials all the way to the finished product. And I've got a lot of things to show you today, but I thought I'd start a little backwards and show you the finished product from the start. Sauerkraut that's just about ready to harvest today being, I think it's the 18th or 19th today, hard to keep track. That's about 2 weeks, that's as long as I let my sauerkraut ferment. You see that I have caraway seeds in here, and the rest of it is just cabbage. So, going over the items that we need to make this finished product, and I'll show you some additional shots of that towards the end here, are 1, the cabbage, as I said. The next largest ingredient by input would be salt. I use Diamond Crystal kosher salt. You really want to use a non-iodized salt for this. Sea salt, kosher salt seems to be the best. Pickling salt would be also fine. I'm basing this information largely off of this book, Wild Fermentation by Sandor Katz. This is, as they say, I think on it, the book that started the fermenting revolution. A lot of people swear by this book, but essentially it's easy as can be. You've got just the cabbage and the salt. You don't need to make a brine. You don't need to add vinegar. The vinegary tasting brine that you taste in lacto-fermented sauerkraut is just the juice that came from the cabbage itself, that was drawn out by both the salt as well as the mechanical action of mixing. So I've got a glass bowl here with the idea of being able to show this to you. One of the things that I just wanted to show you, even though it is a little meticulous, would be how I prepare this cabbage. I like to remove the outer leaves, not just because they might be a little bit dirty, although of course you should clean your cabbage before you ferment with it, and this one's been rinsed off. But there are other reasons for reserving the leaves as well. You'll notice, again, I'm going to show you the finished product here. It's important to keep the brine above the level of the fermenting vegetable because this is an anaerobic ferment, meaning that it does not want access to oxygen. So you deprive the oxygen getting to the vegetables by keeping them submerged. This has a little tricky little lever, which I can show you. But you don't need the tricky little lever if you reserve these leaves after you pack down into your empty clean jar the shredded cabbage. You can simply use the top leaves to press down and keep the, use this as a clever little lever. Other items that you're going to need are cutting board, knife. I mentioned to you I have this bowl, I have this jar for things to go into, I have the salt and my little salt pig. I have a tablespoon measure. I also have a scale, and it's not necessary, but you want to have roughly, if you saw in the book, you want to have roughly 1 tablespoon for every 2 pounds of cabbage. And I'm trying to weigh this so that you can see it. I think the glare might be just so that you cannot. If I could tilt that, I'm not sure if that helps any better. It's 1.999. So perfect little cabbage for us in terms of not having to do any multiplication. I'm going to take this knife and I'm just going to use it starting at the stem butt, pushing down, making sure none of my hands, appendages are in the way of the knife to make it in half. And once I have it in half, you always want to cut your vegetables working with the shape of the vegetables. Wow, this one's a little... That's really lopsided, huh? So this little lopsided guy, I'm going to have to cut out of here. So I'm going to do so by cutting sort of a triangular shape. Let's see if I'm showing this correctly to the video. Cutting a triangular shape so that this stem can come out of here pretty easily. And I'm going to say this is probably going to cut into how much salt I'm going to use because this is a lot heavier than I was expecting the stem to be. Probably all told, this is going to add up. Actually, no need to assume. This is about 1.5 pounds now. So I'm going to use 3/4 of a tablespoon of salt once I get to it. If this were a more regularly shaped cabbage, I would say cut it into quarters. But really what you want to make sure you do is just have some, you want to cut in the same direction the stem was, so that you have some, I guess you might call them spears. And then you have, the leaves are coming up this way. So that what you want to do is you cut horizontally across the leaves. So after you make these vertical cuts to make these, what I've called spears or wedges, you cut then these horizontal cuts to make really fine material for the kraut. And if you have a food processor or something of that sort, that would be fine to use for this. I'm just showing how to cut this vegetable, how to use the shape of the vegetable to work in your favor. This is really shredded this quite fine. And these are about the size and shape that I like my strands to be in the finished product. So that's what you're always trying to keep in mind. Keep in mind the finished product and how you'd like it to be. Of course, if you get some odd shaped ones in there, not too big of a deal if you're not a stickler. I'm just going to cut the rest of these guys up and I'll join you in just a moment. As I mentioned, we had about 1.5 pounds, and it should be about a tablespoon, 1.5 pounds of cabbage, and we should be about a tablespoon so to do 2 pounds. So I'm going to go a little under, this is my tablespoon measure, I'm going to go a little under a tablespoon, and we'll start with that and see how it is. You'll notice I only have half of the cabbage. Half of the cabbage that I've chopped up is in this bowl. That's because it's going to shrink down quite a bit. This video is largely going to be about this hand manipulation, but I think it's because if you listen, you can hear it getting crushed. There's just a lot about this sensory experience that will make sense to you only after having done this and seeing how long this takes. This might actually be more than enough to fit into my chosen vessel, which is a 4-cup jar. I like these guys because this is frankly about the amount of sauerkraut that I enjoy to eat over the time. And it will last for months in the fridge, but I let mine ferment about 2 weeks. You can ferment it for less time. I mean, a day would be fine, 2 days would be fine. It would just taste less funky, be a little bit more fizzy. In the first couple days, you have quite a bit of fizz that's produced, so quite a bit of carbon dioxide that's coming off of these shredded vegetables. But people have kept kraut for months and eaten it then, and that's how they prefer to have it. Okay, now that this is worked down significantly, it was full in the bowl, we're just going to add more, an indeterminate amount more until it's about full. Here we go. Oh, that's beauty. Almost. I still have quite a bit more cabbage here, so I'm just going to add some more of that raw cabbage, and I'm going to keep working it. This is too small a bowl, but demonstration purposes, you know? It's really important so that everybody can see what's happening in there. Bowl, or rather, a jar. I like to have the wide mouth specifically so that I can get my hand in, put the lip over the bowl, and just start packing it in loosely for this moment. I like to get about 1/3 of the way down before I push. Careful you don't push too much force. I've seen people break a jar. You're not trying to do anything too wild. You're just trying to push it so that you can see as I push it, the water level rises up and over. That's what we want. And I'm just going to add more. You pack it as you go, because if you try to pack it at the very end, what you'll end up doing is compressing the upper layer, and that cushions the lower layer, and it just never squeezes out those air bubbles at the very bottom. And it looks like it's going to be full, but just steadily and with patience pack this down. So now you can see I'm upending the bowl. 1.5 pounds of cabbage. Pretty much did it. Could have done with a little more into a jar of this size, but not much more. Now, when I'm pushing down, you can see that the water rises up and over, but it doesn't stay that way. And you want to make sure that you don't have any bits and pieces exposed to the air. Those might mold, those might get something. It's not likely, but you really want to make sure that it's pushed down. That's where these leaves come in again. I like to do a little fold so that you've got the round edge over there, and push the round side in. Use the strength, I guess I'd say, of the stalk. And now this is there is the stalk of the leaf going through on either one of these sides, and then the flaps of the leaf coming out this way. I'm going to use another leaf, again folded in half, and I'm going to put the stalk this way so that the stalks have crisscrossed, trying to keep as much of this material down as possible. I'm trying to see what's the best view here. Now, it's okay if these leaves are exposed to the air, because I don't eat these. I just use them because I don't want to buy fancy, they do sell fancy fermentation weights, which are glass weights that fit into a jar. A jar of this size can actually hold one of those half-cup jars. That's fine too. Oftentimes I do pack this well enough, and it looks like today I have, that the water level stays above these outer leaves, and it can ferment just fine this way, so that it wouldn't be dangerous to eat or anything like that. By the way, lacto fermentation is incredibly safe. There are vanishingly small numbers of food poisoning in general in the US, because our food gets to us at such high quality and has so many quality assurance checks. There are, according to Sandra Katz at least, 0 lacto fermentation hospital visits recorded in as long as he researched for this book. And this was published first in 2003, and the edition I have was the reprint in 2015, and he reiterated that in that space of time, as fermentation took off in the US, no cases had appeared. So he feels confident, and I felt confident because of that, and I'm passing that confidence down to you. Okay, I feel pretty good, and I think this looks pretty visible, that there's a liquid layer that goes up and over. Having said that, if you didn't want to leave it at that, you can just add a little bit more water. No problem. And as a matter of fact, as this dries out, because it might evaporate, you can just add a little bit more water. Beware that I have metal rings and metal lids. Beware that this salt water is going to affect your lids. It might rust them. So remove any detritus from the lid. Remove any water from the threads. And seal it off. The two things that you'll really grow to value in fermenting are masking tape and a Sharpie. You'll see that this one is marked up real nice, and I'm going to do the same for this fellow. That's it. I think that I covered everything well enough. I've got a little bit of a mess here that I need to clean, but this is as easy as can be a wonderful fermenting project to do during these interesting times, and definitely a skill that you want to have if you want to learn to preserve the bounty of your garden, your backyard, your community garden, your CSA, your farmer's market, your grocery store. And a wonderful thing to do with family as well.